Welcome everyone. Today we have our another new episode, and this is debate. Debate is very popular around Asia Pacific, and I believe many universities as well as many school colleges in Asia Pacific, even in North America and Europe, they are promoting debate. We are also promoting debate because through the debate we try to find out better strategy for the society. Today's debate motion is this house believe that the robot is going to increase our quality of life. We have our government side. Today's parliament honorable prime minister will be Professor David Smith, and minister of this parliament, Mr. Tom Rose, and government side parliament members, Mr. Marshall. On the other hand, we have opposition leaders, Professor Rob, opposition deputy leaders, Professor Donalds, and opposition's member of the parliament, Professor Paul. And Professor Ching will join with me as a debate analyst. After the debate, he go for analyze today's debate. So first, I would like to request Professor David Smith uh, to propose the motion.
Thank you so much for the opportunity to uh, present the topic of the fact that we believe that robots are going to increase the quality of life for our citizens and for the opposition, other members of parliament, and actually the citizens who are watching this debate. It is very important that we begin to look at new types of technologies that can benefit not only our nation, but even you individually as citizens. And we believe that robotics technology has progressed to the point to where it's no longer science fiction, but is one where we can actually begin to take it and use it as part of our way to increase it. I actually go back with robots to when I was a youth. And I remember the program The Jetsons with Rosie the robot. And yes, I liked George Jetson's flying car, but Rosie the robot was one which really captured my fascination. I mean, I saw there on television a robot who could cook, who could clean up after me, who could watch other people in the family while we were out doing other things. And it's one which is really there for us. And so what we've seen is we've progressed from science fiction to where we are today is that we're looking forward to the vast economic opportunities that robots will present, uh, and beginning to see that they improve productivity. They take on the undesirable jobs. One of the United States venture capitalists, Peter Thal, recently joined this debate, and he asserts that robots will save us from the future of high prices and low wages. And really, you begin to see that. And if I go back and look in science, the six ways that humans have historically created value, we've done it through our legs, our fingers, our mouths, our brains, our smiles, and our minds. And if you begin to look at them, robots can work in many of those different areas and begin to help us as we're doing that. And we see that working time and time again. The key difference we begin to see is that the rise of robots lie in their consumption. Uh, Developing countries, workers took advantage of robots now for decades. We see them in assembly lines. We're now seeing them in kitchens. We're seeing them in so many different places that it's become not unusual to see robots being used. Um, and Peter Thal, and when he was the CEO of PayPal, he began to use some robots looking at fraud and use the artificial intelligence they brought with them. And what he saw is that the robots could scan things faster than humans, but then passed on to the human what was needed to be done there. And I just want to, as the majority leader, just take a minute, and particularly for the citizens who are listening to this debate, uh, let them understand some of the really non obvious advantages of robots. You've heard me say they can increase production, and we've seen that happen. They also tend to be more accurate than humans. I know for myself, early in the morning, I am not as accurate as I am in the afternoon. And robots don't suffer such a problem. They're accurate as they go. They make fewer mistakes. They reduce wastage is what we've seen by using them, and they tend to be more reliable. Sometimes humans don't show up for work. Uh, Sometimes they forget different things going on, and robots tend to not have that challenge. Uh, One of the very interesting benefits with robots and how they can increase the quality of life is they can work 24/7. One of the places I've seen this is I have multiple friends who have dairy farms. And there's this really interesting thing about cows. They tend to want to be milked early in the morning and actually late at night too. So many of these friends, before they pulled in robotics to help them milk their cows, they had to get up at 5 o'clock in the morning and go milk for a couple of hours. And then the time in the evening where the rest of us traditionally have dinner with our family, they have to be back out milking the cows again. Yet the robots can do it for them, and they only have to respond if an alarm goes off. They save time. Uh, One of them I see that's very interesting is robots don't complain. And I can tell you, as CEO of several companies and leadership, they do. People do all the time. We've seen many places where robots have brought value into our lives. Robotic surgery is a common occurrence today. And it has really, I believe, increased the quality of life for people because it's minimally invasive. I remember as a kid trying to play the game Operation, and my hand just was never stable enough to let the alarm not go off very often. But robots don't have that problem, and we see that. You know, Other places you see it is they can do the dirty work, they can do the heavy work, they can do the heavy lifting. Uh, One of my challenges as I begin to get older is I can't lift as much as I used to. I can't move as fast as I used to. And robots can really help serve that purpose for me. And again, increase my quality of life tremendously because of that. And if you look around our country, there's a lot of places where robots could do the heavy lifting, where robots could go out and do the dangerous work. We've even seen places uh, in nations near us, like in Japan, when they had the reactor meltdown. You're seeing robots doing all the work there and keeping humans out of harm's way. So really a big benefit as you begin to look at that. You know, I tell you what, if you begin to look at factories and assembly, robots, they're fast too. And they can do the dull stuff. I really wish, going back to my opening example, that I did have Rosie the robot out of the Jetsons, because I hate going through the house and dusting or vacuuming the house and sweeping the house. And I would really prefer to have a robot do that because it frees me up for more productive applications for me. They can save money. And well, this one I'm sure it's going to change over time, but robots today can't really tell you no. Uh, they're going, but they're coming there. And it's particularly for our citizens. Robots are versatile. They can do almost any task that we want to do. And it's pretty impressive what you're seeing there. So, they can map disaster zones. When we've had some of our hurricanes here, you see the robots going and doing things. You're seeing them traveling places that humans cannot travel to. And the other thing is they prevent human accidents a lot. We've seen robots are very good at avoiding them, and there. But the opposition's going to say that they take away jobs. The reality is we've looked at robots in other countries is they create new jobs for people. There's a lot of new job titles you're seeing going out to improve robots, not just the technical ones of coding and engineering, but you see them as people who are robot trainers. You're even seeing robot psychologists who are working with robots to help improve the interface to humans, to help them understand the human reaction so that they are more conscious as they're beginning to deal with us and how they represent. Uh, you know, they're really central to a lot of things we're doing. One of the things that my son really enjoyed about robots is that robots now deliver pizza. Robots deliver food to us in restaurants. I was impressed with some of the reactions to COVID because in some of the restaurants where I enjoy going, there are robots who will bring the food to our table from the kitchen. And, the waiters, waitresses are only there to help complement the robots and work with you, the human. So you see that in improving quality of life there and really improving productivity and reducing the number of potential errors. Uh, we've seen them so many places. We've seen them in research in general. We've seen them for space research for decades and decades. But I kind of like to go back and hit a couple of things as it really relates to our citizens in our nation. One of the things that robots will do is they will help us live our life more fully. We age, as we have disabilities, as when we're young and we're trying to get our social instinct together, robots have a place as they are evolving to step in and help us really meet the requirements of our life, meet our satisfactions. And we're beginning to see robots becoming more and more human like. Yes, the early industrial robots you had to program, they had limited functionality, and it was costly to reprogram. But if you look at what's being called now the social robot that can help babysit, that can help us in our homes, who can help us lift things, do the tasks we don't want to. But with robots becoming social, that is really taking part of the whole arguments away of how we're acting and how we're doing things. And, we've seen it break through. We've seen robots work particularly with people who are autistic. We see the robots helping seniors as to become more focused and engaged. We're seeing them begin to talk about robots really excelling at assistive technology and how that's going to happen. You know, Today, if I look at our aging population here in our nation, we really don't have enough caregivers to help, and robot caregivers for older people are really there. If you look at the United States National Institute of Health, the the world population of people above 65 is going to increase from more than about 600 million today to 1.6 billion in 2050. The robots can really help us if we begin to look at that. We see also robots not only bringing food, but they actually act as a telepresent robot for family members, for doctors. We've seen robots become pet setters with all different kinds. We're seeing security robots. We're seeing them in the corporate world. Now we're beginning to see them moving more into the consumer world. We're seeing kitchen robots, again, first in the commercial sector, but now really going over into the private sector as well. We're seeing robots used for telepresence. And this was very interesting the first time I ran into it. One of the doctors, which I've worked with, investors in my companies, uh, he hated going to meetings, and he had a telepresent robot that he would send to his company's board meetings and other companies that he was on the board of. And it had his face, it could react, it could move around the room, it could recognize and solve him the problem of that telepresence. But as I kind of finish this talk and we give the opposition a chance, you know, they represent robots as increasing our quality of life. They represent human progress. Imagine if you were born 100 years ago and you were transported into today. You see all these advances, the mobile phones, electric cars, rocket ships, the internet. Well, guess what? Robots are one part of that. They really represent a very important part of human progress. And robots are helping us spearhead our journey into the future. They're central to the future of growth. They're central to the future of economic development. They're spearheading our journey into the future. They're going to play an ever increasing role in society. They will be part of what we do. They're increasingly taking a larger role. And you know, I still want the day of George Jetson's car where I can fly around in the air and not have to be constrained to roads. But the advantage we have today is we can make Rosie the robot a central part of our life, a central part of our family, and really increase the quality of life we have for others as we go. And one of the most important parts of robots today is the growth of all these sensors that we have, not only machine vision, but we can begin to have them sense ourselves. We have robots which can sense our emotions and respond with emotions. And we see that happening time and time again. So, in conclusion, this house does believe that robots are central to really helping increase the quality of life for the citizens of our nation and the productivity of our businesses in this nation. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor David Smith, for your excellent speech. But anyway, you take more time. I want to give time to opposition leader as well. We have to create a very good and positive field for this debate. So, Professor Rob, based on your requirement, you can take your time. Naturally, we give 7 minutes. But your
Yeah,
today's prime minister.
I'll be short of the 20 minutes that the prime minister took. So yes, with half the time gone, I would open by saying that we do not believe that robots will increase the quality of life, and I'd like to focus specifically on the quality of life because that's the question and point. I might argue on the side that perhaps the prime minister spent way too much time watching the Jetsons on Saturday morning. But the Jetsons don't really define the world in which we live in today. We are in the fourth industrial revolution. I do agree that robots have progressed to a point where they're no longer science fiction. They've been in manufacturing for a long time. We've been doing studies on robotics and automation going back to the 1930s. So there's a lot of actual information, not just opinions surrounding this underlying concept. We pointed out that David Smith pointed out that robots can take on undesirable jobs, but he didn't point out what happens to the people whose jobs they take. He argued that robots would save us from a future of high prices and low wages, but existing work would also indicate that they will introduce a more programmatic method of doing things that could redefine our humanity and make us less human. He argued that robots are better than humans, which may or may not be true. But if we look back at the economic collapse of 2010, the regulators blamed a computer algorithm, basically automation, for the collapse of the market. And what we know with regard to robots automation is they can operate much more quickly than people, which means when they do make a mistake, they make a mistake at scale. With computer vision, we've found that the training sets used for computer vision, which allow robots to tell whether you're a man, woman, and what race you're in, have been largely flawed. And the end result is companies like IBM have exited the segment because the computer vision capabilities are nowhere near where they need to be to do the job. We've certainly watched Tesla deploy automated driving at scale, and I believe we're up to 30 people dead as a result because that technology again was not ready. We continue to deploy technology before it is ready, and that seems to be costing lives, and lives go against the quality of life. The McKinsey Global Institute included a review of how susceptible to automation different jobs might be, and found that hundreds of millions of people worldwide will have to find new jobs or learn new skills. Learning new skills can be more difficult, as CNN later reported, as we discovered in the large automotive plants that we deployed, and using IBM again as an example, when they attempted to retrain a large number of workers who were displaced, in that particular case, by discontinuation of business, not automation. Those workers went into accounting and pretty much destroyed IBM's accounting accuracy over time, showcasing how difficult and damaging it can be to retrain people in jobs they no longer, or they don't really want to do. Gartner reports that hyperautomation, which is tied to robotics, is on their top list of changes, with 85% of Gartner clients reporting they will increase or sustain hyperautomation investment strategies over the coming year. So it's coming. There is no doubt that robotics is coming, and it's coming fast. But we're talking about quality of life. We're not really talking about economic benefits and speed. We're talking about how it will improve the quality of life. And the World Health Organization defines quality of life as an individual's perception of their position in life and the context of their culture and value systems in which they live, and in relation to their goals, expectations, standards, and concerns. We measure quality of life with wealth, employment, environment, physical and mental health, education, recreation, and leisure time, social belonging, religious beliefs, safety, security, and freedom. Robotics could have a positive impact on safety, but a negative impact on personal wealth, except for the very wealthy, the people that own the robots. Employment could have an adverse impact on environment. We are doing a really poor job of recycling electronics, and electronics today produce one of the greatest problems with regard to human health that exists in the world. And we also know that we're talking about physical and mental health, keeping people working and productive, as both Hertzberg and Maslow have covered in their works through the 50s, 60s, and 70s, would indicate that you need to have, for people to be happy, to people have a good quality of life, they need to be working. They need to be doing something productive. We can't just put them out of work and have them be happy. We just last decade, we attempted a large-scale experiment with Baxter the robot. And if you recall, Baxter was designed at $25,000 to replace any manufacturing line worker. What was discovered is it was uneconomically feasible. We were paying the line workers so little that it was cheaper to employ a human to do these repetitive jobs than it was to deploy a robot. Jim Calhoun, who studied utopian overcrowding in the 1950s and 70s, created rat and mice utopias. These were places where the rats and mice didn't have to work. They just, all the food they wanted, everything was done for them. You would figure this would end well. It did not. There were increases in violence. Many of the rats just completely tuned out and just went off and groomed each other. Reproduction dropped to a point where the colonies collapsed, and child rearing also dropped massively, causing the collapse of the colonies, which indicates if you implement robots broadly and you put many people out of work, even if you give them a universal minimum wage or otherwise support them, that society as we know it would collapse. We do not have a study that indicates an alternative outcome. In his book, The Fourth Industrial Revolution, Professor Klaus Schwab, who is the founder and executive chairman of the World Economic Forum, calls for leaders and citizens to together shape the future that works, a future that works for all people, putting people first, empowering them, and constantly reminding ourselves that all of these new technologies are first and foremost tools made for people by people. So that at the end, going to robotics has to surround helping people actually focused on expanding our quality of life. In 1921, and just this last year, Trevan Pettinger wrote, it's easy to get caught up with efficiency and cost, but increased automation and the use of robots could have unintended consequences. For example, when you speak to a human, you get a very different feeling than speaking to a robot. A patient may become reassured by a human touch of speaking to a nurse who smiles and empathizes with them. A robot could be very depressing because it feels informal, non-human, and robotic. For some services like healthcare, education, and personal touch, it is important to have a good service, human touch. If we push for more automation, we may lose out on valuable personal interactions, and our quality of life will be diminished, even if we get a lower prices for goods. Now, I do understand that there is an emphasis on using robotics to create economic benefit. There's no doubt and no argument there. But our argument now is focused on quality of life. And if we don't engage people, if we don't give them meaningful work, if we don't keep them productive, if we just displace them in large numbers with the hope they'll retrain, past experience indicates it will not end well. And if we replace them and just give them their basic needs in terms of money and goods, the large scale mice and rat studies in the early 1960s indicated that society itself will collapse over time. So robots by nature not only do not increase our quality of life, existing work suggests it will decrease it and decrease it substantially unless our efforts are focused specifically on increasing the quality of life. And robotic trends as they currently exist are not so focused. Even going back to the last industrial revolution, the efforts and application of technology was not done to improve quality of life. It was done to improve production and reduce costs. And it is that singular focus of increasing production and reducing costs that is cross purposes to increasing our quality of life. So as it currently exists, the implementation of robotics and automation will reduce our quality of life and not increase it. The opposition rests.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker from the opposition side. Now I request for today's Parliament Minister for Robotics and AI, Mr. Tom Rose.
Okay, well, good. I think what needs to happen, first of all, is how we're defining quality of life and what the quantum is of that, and making sure we're all working from that same premise. In my opinion, the whole reason I'm interested in AI, the whole reason I joined the Transhumanist Party, the point of all of my work, my novel, is fighting human trafficking. And so we can make all kinds of arguments against something that's happening anyway. But it's more important, I think, to focus on how it's best being used to increase the quality of life of the species. It depends on, we could talk about all the way it's made life more convenient for us personally and individually. But I think in society-wise, there are apps out there that need to be downloaded by as many people that can, that use AI to fight human trafficking. If you're in a hotel room, you take a picture, 3 pictures of a hotel room, and it can check its database and link that to a potential, human trafficking network. So that's my quantum of everything that I bring. Everything I argue for is knowing that, unfortunately, within a mile of most of us here right now and watching this in the future, there's a child being exploited in one way or another. It's an insidious thing because nobody likes to talk about this. But AI is a valuable tool to hunt this down and to figure this out. And we really need to come to grips with that. I was thinking maybe today I'll take the opposite end, because I would like to argue. I can see how it would be healthy to argue against AI and robots and things. It's a healthy thing to do. But the conversation we had just before the broadcast reminded me of the most important way to use AI right now. The quantum we should be using as the value of making a quality of life better is fighting the reality that within a mile radius of most of us watching this, there's a child being exploited, and we can stop that. We can stop that. We can use social media differently. We can use all the data that we've freely given over and come out of our denial and switch it on, and for a limited time really focus on this issue, this huge issue that's insidious because nobody likes to talk about it. So that's what I would like to do, is make sure we're all talking about the same quantum of the quality of life. And so that's where I'm coming at it from. And there's no better tool right now than AI to fight this thing. And so that's where I'm coming from.
Thank you, Mr. Tom Rose. Now I request Deputy Leader of the Opposition, Professor Donald.
You're muted.
Can you unmute, please?
Everybody's been making some great points, and I agree that there are areas where computers might improve the quality of life. I mean, they're automating Amazon warehouses, and so Jeff Bezos is able to spend less on salaries, and so it's improving Jeff Bezos' quality of life. I mean, not that he really needs it. I mean, I think his quality of, I don't think an extra few $1 billion here or there is going to make a lot of difference to his lifestyle. But if we look at history of technology, I think it's important. I'm not going to make the argument, as was suggested, that the change is going to put people out of work and create those kinds of problems, because people are endlessly clever, and they've always figured out how to use the technology to be able to create new jobs and to create more work. I mean, we're the lowest unemployment in history right now. However, I want to think of it in the short term versus the long term. In the short term, for a generation or two, when technology really changes, there's huge disruptions. A lot of people think the Industrial Revolution was about improving, making clothes and improving, making this and that and the other thing. But there's a wonderful book called The Empire of Guns, where they show that the big money that was made in the Industrial Revolution was guns. And the British Empire was expanding at that time. And because of that, they became heavily militarized. And basically they taxed people and bought guns with it and expanded the empire that way. And that was what really drove the Industrial Revolution. And of course, that caused huge problems for people in India and elsewhere. When we talk, so what I'm getting with this is that what is a question everyone has asked is, what is quality of life? Well, I suggest that we could stop human trafficking without AI. There's enough food to feed everybody in the world. There's plenty of money to provide housing to the homeless people in the United States. They've done it in other countries. It's something we can do. But what's missing is the will to do that. So if you look at hunters and gatherers, there's been studies that have shown, and I can give you the name of the people. I just knocked over my mouse. 1 second while I put the battery back. Okay. Hunters and gatherers worked 15 to 20 hours a week to do all the food that they needed, and the rest of the time they spent basically having fun, hanging out with each other, playing music, whatever hunters and gatherers did for fun. In Silicon Valley, people work 60-hour weeks, and they don't make enough money to afford a home because the prices are so incredibly high around here. And they could move to Austin where homes are cheaper, but there's supply and demand, and the more people that do that, the more expensive homes become in Austin. And I know I've seen that their prices are going up like crazy there too. So the problems that we have in the quality of life is probably declined from technology overall, from working 15 to 20 hours a week and having everything you need to working 60 hours a week and not having everything you need. And the other, so there's no reason to believe that having new technology like robots is really going to improve people's quality of life, because historically that's not what happens. There's parts of it. For instance, penicillin has made a big difference in people's lifespan, and we can point to a lot of different things. But then we have to ask the question, does that really make people happier? Does that make people more fulfilled? Does that make people feel that they're setting and achieving goals within their lives? And I don't see that it is. It's never happened. And I think we're looking at the wrong thing. And I also want to mention that AI is way overblown. There was just a video that was done with somebody driving his Tesla on autopilot. And when it saw some light rail tracks, it decided it was a road and started driving down the light rail tracks. It didn't see pedestrians. It was running into random objects. Self-driving cars are so far from actually being able to do work that it'll be a long time before they do. And then I also want to talk about Rosie the robot. I mean, wonderful idea, but imagine Jeff Bezos made the most expensive and best robot in the world and was having a dinner party. And Rosie was going into the kitchen to prepare drinks and coming out and serving the drinks and serving cocktails, serving hors d'oeuvres and doing all these wonderful kinds of things. It doesn't, people are moving around in the room, so Rosie would have to be able to identify the person that ordered the Mai Tai or whatever, and they might have gone, they might have moved somewhere else. Facial recognition really is pretty dicey right now. And the idea that a robot could really understand emotions is not, basically, it kind of misunderstands what emotions are. In your body, you have what are called interoceptive networks. And what those are systems of nervous system that allow you to feel what's going on inside you. So if you feel your stomach growl, you feel hungry, you feel upset, your adrenaline pumps into your body, and you can feel the reaction from the various things that are going on inside your body. And then once we feel those things, we interpret them as emotions, and and those are socially constructed. Different people interpret them in different ways, and I mean, you do. I mean, people go and jump out of airplanes for fun, and it's terrifying. They do it for the adrenaline rush. Cocaine gives you an adrenaline rush. So all of these, we don't really even know what emotions are. And I want to just finish up by saying there's a professor at Stanford who, see if I can remember his name. I can come up with it later, but he studied and found out that human beings tend to anthropomorphize technology, and they start believing it acts like a human. So, for instance, if a person's abrasive and you have a computer program that's abrasive, they feel more comfortable with it than they do if they're with a computer program that's polite. Likewise, if people are generally polite, they prefer a computer program that's polite. So we basically can believe that computers are interacting with us in some sort of a way that's similar to humans because we project that on them. But all they're doing is basically recognizing patterns and then following rules. So it's basically recognize pattern, look up the rule to follow. Recognize pattern, look up the rule to follow. And that's nothing like human beings work. And it will be a long time before we're able to do that. And the question is even if we did, would it really make our lives better? So that's what I'm saying.
Thank you, Professor Donald. Now I request member of the parliament from the government side, Mr. Marshall.
Thank you, Sharif. And I want to pay my compliments to our Prime Minister, David Smith, for creating an excellent case that robots can be beneficial to humankind. And I also want to point out to the citizens of our country, that's why Prime Minister David Smith and I are in the government and the opposition are not. If you listen to the opposition, their arguments are based on information based in the 60s and 70s, based on false information about psychology. I have a clinical psychology degree, and I can tell you, you need to update, the honorable opposition has to update their information on psychology and not take selective quotes from various people. With regard to robotics, which is really the argument, can robotics be good for humankind and for people? I state, just like my Prime Minister does, David Smith, that yes, robots can be good for humans. Can they be used for bad or for evil? Of course, any technology can be done like that. And the Honorable Donald Steiny pointed out that, you know, during the British Empire, and this sounds like a episode out of The Crown, that you know, streaming video from Netflix, that of Queen Elizabeth, that yes, you can have the British arm themselves. People in the United States rebelled against the British Empire under King George. We're always going to have those issues, and they didn't have robotics back then, Honorable Steiny or Honorable Rob. This was not the issue. Technology is always going to be evolving, and the adoption of technology is really the issue. And so I just want to make a statement before I continue my conversation that at the top of the hour, I'm going to be leaving this debate to go and propose legislation for our country with some EU interrogators to help us understand democratic means of crafting legislation for such things such as robotics. We're not saying that you don't need legislation. We're arguing the point that robotics can be helpful to our country and our countrymen. And like I said, the Honorable David Smith pointed out the very opportunities that can lie in front of us. If you want to argue that everything is bad in the world, that's not hard. Everybody can do that. You want to say AI doesn't work? You want to say AI will never be adopted or it's going to be difficult to adopt? Be my guest. You want to use Tesla as an example? That doesn't mean that it doesn't work. Let me give you an example of where in the world robotics are working right now as we speak. So there is a robot named Paro, P-A-R-O. You can look it up. It is a therapeutic robot. It's a baby harp seal. That's what it looks like. Intended to be very cute and to have a calming effect on and elicit emotional responses, Representative Steiny, in patients of hospitals and nursing homes, similar to animal-assisted therapy, except using robots. And where is this predominant? And they have tremendous use cases of this and great data on it? Japan. Now, of course, our country is not Japan. We're not the third largest economy in the world, or the fourth largest economy in the world. But the population of Japan is already beyond the threshold of over 65. And they're using technology to help manage that process in a very positive manner. So all I'm suggesting, and believe me, I'm not suggesting that Paro doesn't have its issues, but the Japanese are addressing it. And what we're suggesting is that robots can be to the benefit of our population, create jobs, and not take away jobs. And the fact of the matter is that robots is like anything else that's human created. Robots don't create themselves. They're created through human intervention. And in that regard, I want to bring one other issue up, that one of the technologies that's coming along with robots is called the robotic simulator or robotic simulator. And a robotic simulator is a simulator used to create applications for a physical robot without depending on the actual machine, thus saving cost and time. And who's doing that? Humans, not robots. So it creates more jobs for programmers and for other capability technologists. And we want to be a society of technology to help advance our quality of life in our society. Now, if you believe that, as the opposition does out there, my fellow citizens, that we shouldn't go down this road, and you want to stay in the past and not become part of the future and part of today, of what's happening today, then let's get rid of robotic simulators. Let's get rid of the jobs that create that. And these jobs are also behavior-based robotic jobs, in which you need people of psychological backgrounds, people that have degrees like me in clinical psychology, to help understand how robotics can help humankind and not work against it. Again, I think I leave it to my generous prime minister to make the case, and I think he's shown the case, and I think he's shown why we are in government and the opposition is not, because we are not naysaying robotics. We are saying that robotics, yes, has issues like anybody else, and we will regulate that. That's why we are in the parliament. We are here to help regulate these issues, not go against the technology itself. There's always going to be new technologies. All these technologies require some form of regulatory approach so that they're never used by people who are the people that could create a negative outcome. We're not suggesting that we create Teslas that are not properly regulated like they are in the United States or in the state of California that causes the accidents. In our country, we are more cautious, but we are also progressive. So I make the statement and the quality of information that robots are here. They're not going away. So therefore, let's embrace the robots, embrace them as part of human quality of life issues, and bring tools to the table, both regulatory and technological, to help keep them in place and create a better quality of life. On that note, I thank my fellow parliamentarians for taking the time to present their arguments. But again, as I said before, this is why David Smith is prime minister and our government is in power and they are not. Because if you listen to them, you will not have the jobs that you're seeking. Your children will not have the jobs that they're seeking. And we as politicians need to ensure that. So again, it's another reason why you are voted for us to be in the government and run the government and not the opposition. On that note, I take umbrage and thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Marshall, for your excellent speech. That's why we are organizing this mock parliament. And I believe our audience also want all of you in the real parliament in your countries, because maybe you can contribute more. And that is the success of WTEF Forum, because we figure out some good politicians for different countries. Thank you for your excellent speech. Now I request from the opposition side, opposition's member of the parliament, Professor Paul.
Yes, thank you. I find it fascinating that the government is encouraging people to embrace robots, yet the government has forgotten to mention sex robots, right? We've had just, lots of discussion here, and there's no mention of sex robots, which are a very big thing, actually. How will our population be maintained when there's a vast horde of sex robots? There'll be no need to procreate. Population will collapse. And, even now on social media applications like Facebook, etc., there are huge numbers of advertisements for, human companions, mostly some, attractive, voluptuous female who, is advertised as download the app and you can speak to her, you can talk to her about all her problems and she'll respond, etc. So this is horrible for human relationships. If this replaces human relationships, then it will draw people further and further away from each other, which is what has already happened in the last 2 years with the virus. So my big concern with these robots is that as the number of robots go up and up, and as morally questionable issues with sex robots, etc., increase, then people will be less in contact with each other, and populations will go down. Now, as far as child exploitation is going on, within a mile of me, multiple children have been exploited over the last 3 weeks. I'm in the city of Ottawa. There's been 400 trucks parked downtown for 3 weeks. 100 of these trucks, a quarter of these trucks downtown, have kids on board that have been sleeping in the trucks for weeks on end in the harsh Ottawa winter. You know, with a couple kids per truck, we're talking about 200 or 300 children being exploited because their parents bring them on a protest, which then becomes an occupation. Horns have been blasting nonstop at levels higher than 120 dB. People have measured. And this is deafening. It's actually making kids deaf. Personally, I walked down there and unplugged an air horn, and a group of people, of course, surrounded me. And one kid, a little girl who's there with her parents in the protest, living in this truck, yelled, "Go somewhere else. Go where it's quieter." Not only that, many of the kids, there's many kids living in downtown residences, and they've been exposed to this constant noise and so on. Now, the reason I bring this up is because this is what the industry, this is what large groups of people are able to do with, to protest the vaccine. But these are the very people that will be losing their jobs when there's automation of trucks. It's not just the trucks, it's the cabs and delivery service. Huge numbers of service jobs will be completely lost when we go to the self-automation. So where will these people work? What will these people do? You know, what will their quality of life be? Now, also in many popular, shows on Netflix, for example, notice that, when it involves a person traveling through time, going to the future, they often reach a dystopian type of situation. People are very much more willing to go back in time. Think of Outlander. People have gone back in time, but nobody goes to the present because, often, I might think, the present and the future is much more complex. It's much more, the way of life is much different. The human brain can only process so many, a certain number of things in our minds, and with the complexity ever increasing in our world, and it will ever more increase with robotics, it really makes the human question, who we are and what will our role be in society. As robots become smarter than us, as robots do all of the menial work and then take over more and more advanced tasks. I mean, what's the point? Does humanity, do living humans actually even have place in a future world of robotics? If we get that far, given abrupt climate change. One other point is, I'd like to say, a peer-reviewed study just recently examined rationality in society, and it quite clearly shows that rationality and scientific thought in humans has been on the decline since about the 1980s, and emotions and emotional response and intuition and has been on the rise. So rationality is going down, emotion has been going way up. The collective, and this is done by studying words in millions of books between 1850 and present day. So they went through and they analyzed the language in millions of books. They analyzed the language in the New York Times, and they analyzed the language in Google searches. So they looked, for example, at the ratio of the word I to the word we, etc., to he or she to they. And they found that the individualistic, the I and the I want this and I want to do this and it's all about me, the individual, that has gone way, way up. and the collective, the we, has gone way, way down. And I would attribute a lot of this to social media, to the rise of artificial intelligence, to the rise of robots, if you like. So people are becoming stupider and stupider as robots get more and more intelligent, and we know where this is going to end up. Like, it's pretty obvious. So anyway, that's all I'd like to say.
Thank you, honorable opposition member of the parliament. Now I want to go for the closing remarks. First, I request Professor Donald from opposition side.
Okay. Well, I'm sorry Mr. Marshall's gone, but I think that the things that he said were some of the things he said were things that he really hadn't done research on. The research that I recommend comes from a Stanford professor who's named Clifford Nass, N-A-S-S, who passed away recently. But some of his students, like my friend Brian Kugelman, are currently and actively doing this research. His PhD, fairly recent, was on how human beings anthropomorphize technology. So they basically have emotional responses from technology. So saying that you have that I didn't say that there was emotional responses from technology is exactly the opposite of what I said. And saying that I don't think there should be robots is just a complete fabrication. That's not what I said. What I said is I answered the question before us. The question isn't whether we should have robots or not. The question is whether robots are going to improve our quality of life. And what I'm suggesting and I'm saying is quality of life is how a society basically feels about the world that they're living in. And if you look at the world, you can find, well, where are people happiest? I mean, you can answer those questions. In Finland, they're the happiest, and they're very high tech. They were using cell phones many years before we were here in the United States. They have been using vending machines that work with your phone forever. They've been doing it they were doing it when I lived there in 2009. So just technology isn't what makes the Finns happy. What makes the Finns happy is that they do things like they have 2 months vacation every year. They have incredibly generous maternity leave and paternity leave, and various other kinds of things are the kinds of things that really achieve quality of life. I want to add again that there's a wonderful science fiction kind of view that computers are getting more intelligent and they're starting to understand things and things like that. And that's just equivocation on what learning and understanding means. You can say that if you give a command to Alexa and Alexa does the command, you can say that Alexa understands you, but that's going back to what I just was talking about. We anthropomorphize these things. We say it's understanding it. We use that word, but it's just looking stuff up in a database. That's all it's doing. It's not anything to do related to understanding. If you use Alexa, you know it's so easy to have Alexa misunderstand you. And it's not and see, I just used the word understand. When I talk about Alexa not being able to actually do the command that you would like it to do when you say something to it, because it hears what you say and then it looks it up and it misrecognizes the pattern. And that's the same reason Teslas run into things and don't notice pedestrians and go down railroad tracks and various kinds of things like that, is because we aren't reached the point. we say that they're learning, but they're not learning. They're just tuning variables in a in a linear equation. That's all they're doing. They're not, just because the world around it changes them internally, we anthropomorphize it and say that they're learning, or we use the word learning as a marketing tool, but they're not learning in any sense like human beings. I want to give one more example, which is that if you imagine that you want to teach a robot about a chair, so what do? You look up, well, it's got 4 legs, it's got a back, so on like that. And maybe over time with deep learning, you can show it so many chairs that it'll recognize a chair. But a small child looks at a chair and they know it's something that could be made into a fort. They know that it's something that they're not supposed to draw on, that it's something that they can use to get to the cookie jar. All these uses for it that are just there in a kid's mind that they've learned somehow. And we don't even know how people learn that. And it's got to do with basically absorbing it from the environment. Kids learn 10 words a day at a certain point in their life, and they learn them the way I just talked about. They learn what they can do with them, the actions that go with it. How could we teach? What kind of a database would we create that had all that information in it? We're very, very far from being able to do that. But going back to what I said right when I started, is that there's certainly areas that AI and robotics is going to be able to make things easier, taking awful jobs that humans do. As somebody pointed out, going into nuclear reactor accidents and being able to clean them up. There's many things that they'll be able to do, but as even the opposition pointed out, just because we have new technology doesn't mean that our lives change. And I don't see, if we're going to spend the money in this country and invest the money that we need, I think that spending money on robots is fine, but we've got to also spend money on improving the quality of life, and they're two separate things.
Thank you, Professor Donald. Now I request for the closing remarks from Professor David Smith. He is Prime Minister for today's Parliament.
My remarks will be brief at this point because the opposition has really failed to call out how robots cannot help the citizens of our great nation increase the quality of their life. I mean, we've heard examples of different things, many of them happening well in the past. We've heard examples of using Alexa. I just asked my Alexa if robots would help the quality of life, and it was a 3-minute answer that says yes, and citing examples such as robots helping lift heavy things, nano robots going into the human body and doing surgery inside the human body without having to do other things. You know, the opposition has talked about sex robots. It's kind of interesting that was from the opposition party versus the party in power, because, you know, maybe that's one of the differences there. There are places where robots are being used as companions, where they're helping increase mental health. There's places where you have some of our citizens who have disabilities. The robots are there to help them live a more normal life, doing the things that they cannot do. The biggest thing to say, though, to the rest of the Parliament and our citizens is robots are a reality. We cannot take them away within our nation. We cannot go and backtrack from where we are. We can help put rules in place to regulate them. We can help apply their application to the good that we need in our country. And as we see both within our country and looking globally, robots have been proving time and time again to help increase the quality of life, to do things that we cannot do, to do things that we do not want to do, and to be in harm's way, to keep us out of harm's way. So my fellow citizens, that's really our case for our belief that robots can help increase the quality of life for our nation and for all the citizens of our nation. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor David Smith. Now I request for analyzing the debate, Professor Ching. Can you unmute, please? Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Interesting talk. Let me start. I'll be very short. Okay, don't worry. Let me start with the quality of life. Okay, that is central point. I'm for this. Okay, I speak of what I'm for. Then I will speak what I'm against. Actually, from your analysis, I seem to match this. Okay, the quality of life. The basic point is that robots like to work. Humans like to think. Okay, you give a human a thinking lifestyle, he will have a higher quality of life. A robot just go, no, they are built to work. They like to work. Okay, so basically, for today, for current society, before robot, humans work as robot substitute. Okay, all this work should be done by robot, but now we don't have robots, so humans substitute the robot. So in my company, Pole Science, we just say, humans are robot substitutes. Okay, it's going the opposite way. Okay, then what I'm against of this discussion, which you point out very well, they has something to do with value. Society should progress orderly from the age of science to the age of social science, to the age of life science, then to the age of robotics, to the age of self-creation, then to the age of fuzzy logic. Okay, another, we need to progress gradually in an orderly fashion. We need to have value to determine whether a robot we have will increase our quality of life or not. Okay, before we actually have the ability to build robot to replace human work. Okay, so basically, I'm for society should have robots. I'm for that. Okay, but I'm against it because the society is not progressing orderly as it should. Okay, you can use robot to fight wars. You can use robot to kill people. There are bad things you can do with robot. But once you have the value theory, you understand you're rational, human become rational, then we will know what kind of robot to build. Also, when we build robot, we need the technology in our understanding of humans, of life science. Then we go to robot. Robotics, in my opinion, comes after age of life science, not before. In the age of science, it's all about science. Okay, that is just machines. Okay, so basically my comment. Okay, both sides has this, good points. Okay, so
Thank
it can
you.
be both for and against. Okay.
Thank you. This is really excellent debate. According to my views, it's excellent debate, especially from both of the government and opposition, how they play their role. It's exactly the parliamentarian role. And we believe this kind of people, they should go to parliament and they should contribute for the nations, and they should develop the policy like this, how they discuss today, and they can develop the policy. Many important aspects come, many scientific issues come, many social science related issues come, and all of the logic is very important, very strong. We cannot deny any of the logics. Even some point I was confused. Who is doing good? It's the government and opposition. And debate should be like this. Parliamentarian debate should be like this. So I request all of our audience, those who are young, you can learn from our speakers how they do different analyses and give very important reference. This is important. And side by side, we also taking very good initiative. World Talent Economic Forums, we are advocating modern science, engineering, and technologies. So those who want to publish papers, you can publish papers. We are working with some good journals. So even there is one journal, Feature of Robot Life. Already the scientists, those who are editors, they already join in WT Forum dialogue, as well as from our board of advisors, Professor Donalds, Professor David Smith, Professor Fred Phillips, uh, uh, even Professor Rob and Professor Marshall, all of them actually reviewer for this journal. And also we are also trying to solve some social problem also. The human trafficking is a very important problem. We are working with World Economic Forum for solving these things. Specifically, their social entrepreneurship foundations actually helping us to solve these human trafficking issues. Many famous social entrepreneurs from around the world, organizations like BRAC, World Toilet Organizations, many prime ministers and many politicians and many peoples actually joining with World Talent Economy Forum. So hopefully we can solve human trafficking related problem. But we need all of your support from our today's speak. Those who want to join this initiative, you can join. Actually, World Talent Economy Forum more in action. Beside these dialogues and debate, we are trying to solve this problem with all of our good initiative. So beside that, if you have a better idea, better strategy, just share with us. We have our board of advisors. If they accept your idea and strategy, we love to contribute through this process. And the young generations, especially, the next month, 22 April, we have the largest event with India Rotary Club. So we are launching program for the students. We already helping 3,200 students. Even from our speakers, if you want to contribute for our students, you can, as well as we will arrange open dialogue uh, for this Water Day, International Water Day. So even if you have a better solution, we are open for that, because we need to work together as a team. We need to help each others. Uh, the developed nations and developing nations, when they work together, they can solve many social complex problems. So I'm happy that we have very, very special speakers and the scholars in our team. So dear audience, if you need any support, just send us email. Hopefully our speakers, our board of advisors, our different partners from around the world, they will work together and solve any kind of problem. So next month we will focus on water purifications. So thank you everyone for joining today's session. It's an excellent debate. Personally, I have experience to attend World Debating Championship, Oxford IB and Cambridge IB. It's a very high quality debate, trust me. We do debate in Harvard, in MIT, in Stanford, like Oxford Union, in the Cambridge Union. This is very high quality debate. And you, all of you deserve my respect. And I'm sure our audience really like today's debate. Thank you. Bye-bye and take care.